welcome to Talking Youth Work. My name is Anita Silva, and together with Rui Branco, we interview experts and practitioners that have a say when it comes to innovation in youth work. This current series is funded by the project Inception of Learning, that is funded by the European Commission through the Erasmus Plus Youth Key Action 2 projects. This project aims to support youth workers, trainers, and educators in delivering quality learning experiences in the field of youth in the context of Generation Z and Generation Alpha. Hi, today's episode is one I've been really looking forward to sharing with you. We're diving into the world of adolescence, not as a problem to fix, but as a phase to understand more deeply. And to guide us, we're joined by David Yeager, a psychological scientist who has spent years studying young people, their motivations, and the environments that help them thrive. He's a professor of psychology at the University of Texas, Austin, co-founder of the Texas Behavioral Science and Policy Institute, and he's best known for his research conducted with Carol Dweck, Angela Duckworth, and Greg Bolton on short but powerful interventions that influence the adolescents' behaviors such as motivation, engagement, healthy eating, bullying, stress, mental health, and more. And he is the author of the book 10 to 25, where he explains his findings and illustrates them with concrete examples. In our conversation, we explore what it really means to understand teenagers, not by analyzing them from a distance, but by turning the lens back on ourselves. We unpack how our own beliefs, expectations, and assumptions as adults shape the way we interpret young people's behavior. We also talk about something I find incredibly powerful, the idea of a mentor mindset. What does it mean to truly support young people? Not by lowering our expectations or controlling them, of course, but by holding them to high standards while also communicating deep trust in their potential. So this episode is an invitation to rethink the way we relate to young people and maybe even to challenge some of the stories that we carry about them. So join in the conversation and let's talk youth work. Hello. Dr. David, so nice to have you today. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Today I am Zooming from Lisbon, Portugal. Where are you Zooming from? Normally we always share with our guests where we are.
Austin, Texas.
All right. And with us, Rui Branco, as usual. Rui, how are you and where are you?
I'm in Carcavelos, near Lisbon, also Portugal.
Great. So let's start this conversation. Dr. David, it's so great to have you. And we always like to ask our guests, how did they end up having this interest or their current job? And currently, you're a professor of psychology and a psychological scientist. Yeah. But I know that you used to be a middle school teacher, a basketball coach. So what led you to get interested in the topic of new generations?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you said, I used to be a teacher. That was my first job out of college. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English literature, and then I was kindergarten through 8th grade PE. So I taught 8 classes a day. I was also the English as a second language instructor during my lunch period. And then after school, I ran the book club, the computer club, and then I coached 6th and 8th grade basketball.
Wow, you were active.
Yeah, it was a school where they kind of needed you to do a lot. And then also like whenever the internet broke, then I had to crawl through the attic and replace cables and fix that kind of thing. So yeah, it was very much a whirlwind experience, but I learned a lot. And one of the big things I learned was that you can have great plans for what you're supposed to get young people to do in your class or in your activities. But if they're not motivated to do it, then nothing's going to happen. And yet the training I was given to be a teacher all focused on the activities, as though kids show up every day saying, oh, I'm so excited to learn the hardest possible stuff. But that was like true for 5% of kids. And the other 95% need a reason to do the work. And it was just baffling to me that nobody really trained me or prepared me on the motivational side. But on top of that, that there wasn't good science for it. So I ultimately left the classroom to do the kind of science that I would have wanted when I was a teacher. And I ended up at Stanford working initially under a guy named Bill Damon, who studies purpose. And then I eventually moved over to work with Carol Dweck, who created the concept of growth mindset. And then the rest is kind of history. We kind of got on our way doing research together then.
And that is wonderful. And that led, I guess that all led up to your book, 10 to 25. And I would go straight into a question about a concept that I think is central to your book, which is that you argue that young people, they are highly sensitive to respect and status. And I want to contrapose that to the perceptions that I hear from a lot of youth workers who perceive young people many times, like you said, with lack of motivation or disengagement, or they're not interested. So what might we be misreading here?
Yeah, I mean, I think what happens is that we look at young people and they don't seem to be proactively doing what we think that they should be doing. And so then we try to explain what they should be doing using adult logic. And so we often have a very simple heuristic. We're like, well, I'm successful in life. Therefore, whatever logic I use to guide my own life is the logic that would make this child successful. And so if only I could say out loud what my thought process is, then if this child was wise, then they would do what I say. And if they don't care about themselves or their future, or if they're being unwise, then they won't do what I say. And then in that case, they just deserve whatever consequences happen to them. And so we adopt a communication style that I call grown-splaining, which is that you kind of like try to directly transmit adult logic into children's brains. And then we accuse them of being irrational whenever that logic doesn't work for them. And my argument is that, if you think of it from the perspective of a young person, there's a lot of reasons why grown-splaining doesn't work. So one is just that, a lot of adults who go on to work with young people, teachers, for example, they were the kind of people who generally did well in school, or at least weren't in trouble all the time in school. And then whenever they finished regular school, they were like, what should I do now? And then they're like, I'm gonna do more school. And then after they did more school, they were like, where should I get a job? And then they get a job in school. That's how much they love school, is that they never left school. Okay. And that's like 5% of kids. And so their internal logic made sense to them, but it actually, even when they were kids, it didn't make sense to 95% of their peers. So kind of the first argument is like, there's a different set of, logical reasoning principles that we may need to consider pulling on rather than our own intuition of what worked best for us when we were young. And then the other thing is that when we try to impose our will on young people, then we're threatening, first of all, their sense of autonomy, their sense that they can make choices to determine their futures. And second of all, their sense of competence, their idea that they have the ability to think and reason rationally and make wise decisions. Right. And so, those are two of the biggest needs that people have. And now you've threatened both of them. And so when you threaten basic needs, that comes across as disrespectful. If I treat you like you have no ability to make choices to determine your future, right, that you're incompetent and you have no agency, that feels disrespectful. Right. And now I've pushed you away. I've made you less motivated. And so my argument in the book is that there's an alternative way to interact with young people, and it's a way that honors and values their need for status and respect. And I don't mean just their social ranking or how many likes they get on social media. What I mean is the deep down sense that they are a person of worth and a person of value who is competent, who can make adult-like choices, or at least is on the path to doing so. And I think young people crave that. I think they're motivated by it. And I think they're willing to do all kinds of hard stuff if they perceive it as aligned with their desire for status and respect.
I have one question related to what you call the neurobiological incompetence model that has been, it's still a lot of people talk about it, is the thing that I think that gets amplified, the way that people grown-splain, because if you're speaking to a brain that it has difficulty in understanding you, you have to grown-splain even more. And how can we start to change the conversation from that? It's not that the prefrontal cortex is not developed enough to do the right things or to explain it for teenage and young people to understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
maybe we need just to explain that concept for our listeners who aren't neuroscientists. This concept of neurobiological incompetence model.
Yeah. So I think what happens is that when we try to apply adult-like logic to young people and it doesn't work, then we presume that the reason why is that their brains are broken and deficient. That and the more technical version is that teenagers' brains are hijacked by their emotions, by their short-term desires, like the desire for pleasure or to avoid pain. And that hijacking causes the rational, reasonable part of their brains to be overridden or ignored. And what I call the neurobiological incompetence model is a version of that argument which adds the step of saying that those brains are basically permanently compromised until puberty is over and they're 25 years old. Okay, that the young brain is incapable of thinking about the future and making logical, good choices. Once you adopt that belief, and that's a prominent societal belief, right? Then good mentoring practices don't make sense to you. Like, why would I ask you an open-ended question and wait for you to answer if I think your brain is fundamentally idiotic because it's overcome with emotion and hormones, right? So for like, if a teenager came home from a party they weren't supposed to be at, right? And if I held the incompetence model in my mind, then I'm like, oh, I know why you went to the party and broke the rule. It's because you were being impulsive, short-sighted, selfish, like anti-authority. You weren't thinking about the safety and all the dangers or my feelings as the adult. And you were just in your own selfish little short-sighted world, right? So it'd be weird, very weird in that circumstance to be like, walk me through your logic about why you went to this party. Okay. But there's an alternative model. The alternative model is that teenagers' brains are not permanently and lastingly broken and deficient and short-sighted, but instead that they're just really aligned with what they perceive as status and respect, and choices that come across to adults as irrational and short-sighted are actually, they're just devoting 100% of their attention to a different goal than what we want. So like in the example of the teenager who went to the party rather than staying home to do their math homework, right? Well, it's like, well, okay, what's a reason why doing math homework is irrational to the kid? And it's actually not that hard to make that case, right? I mean, so why should you do algebra? Right? Adults know it's like, oh, well, there's this linear progression in your career. But what we say to kids, right, is, well, if you factor trinomials on these worksheets for a really long time, then your reward for doing that is next year you get to take a harder math class. And then after that, you get a harder math class. And then if you're lucky, you can impress a college admissions officer who might evaluate your record and say, yes, you were prepared for more hard math classes. And then you'll take out the most student debt that you'll ever have, so that you can pay other people to ask you to take even harder math classes. And if you do that and do everything that adults tell you to do, then maybe by the time you're in your middle 30s, then you can afford a mortgage. Like that's the Western dream right now, right? And then we're like, they're so irrational. It's like, well, I don't know. Like some 14-year-old is supposed to wait 20 years. So that way they can like maybe kind of own a 2-bedroom home. Mm-hmm. Right. And like, that's a long time to wait. Meanwhile, why is it? So it's not always, quote, rational when you think of it from what the adults want kids to do. But now think of it from the perspective of okay, well, why would a kid go to a party? Well, on the one hand, they might worry about the, disappointing their parents or, safety. But on the other hand, what if at that party or even on the way to or from the party, something happens that is hilarious or unforgettable that you tell stories about for the rest of your life with those 5 friends you were with? Like somebody buys something stupid at a gas station and everybody laughs at them, or the police show up and you all have to run away, or, some stranger yells at you out of a car and says something weird and you guys think it's hilarious. Like, who knows what could happen? And the premise of every single teenage movie is that they go out for a night on the town and something unforgettable happens, and then they will talk about it the rest of their lives. I mean, that's the premise of Adventures in Babysitting too. Like it's, like that's the premise of like the whole
and that's
genre.
The stories of their parents as well.
Right. And is it crazy for a 15-year-old to worry that they would miss out? Not really. Like I'm about to have my 30th high school reunion. There's 100% chance I'm going to talk about stuff we did freshman year. Yeah. Right. And so like, is it irrational? And are they not thinking about the future? Well, I don't know. Like, what future are they thinking of? Maybe they're not thinking about taking on student debt so they could take hard math and science classes and then one day maybe have a chance in the economy. Maybe they're thinking about a future of not being alone. And what's worse than social death and having no friends, right? And so again, like when you take this incompetence model, then your lens for everything is that they're just hormonal idiots. But when you take the status and respect model, you're like, oh, there's just different priorities depending on how things are framed to them. And then now that raises interesting questions like, what is the way to frame doing your math homework as having as positive of an effect on your status and respect as being out with your friends? Well, maybe that's too tall an order, but maybe not, Like many successful adults had that one mentor who they looked up to and they wanted to impress, and they would do anything to impress that person because it gave them a sense of self-respect, right? And so my argument is like, surround young people with those kinds of adults who are going to demand a lot, who are going to expect a lot, but are going to like believe that young people are capable of wise choices and caring about their future under the right conditions and when things are framed in the right way.
I think that you're pointing out a lot of important issues. And then I think one of the issues I want to maybe drill into is nowadays there is a lot of concurrent options for young people and a lot of voices talking to them through social media, through their friends. So there's a lot of brands reaching out to them very efficiently, which, of course, talk to their sense of status and try to sell them all kinds of things, or tell them that they should be this kind of identity or look like that or act like that or whatever. And on the other hand, going back to this youth work field or teachers, educators in general, we're trying not only to pull them onto school, but also to become active citizens, to learn how to act in society and be active in society and have a say and participate. And how do you see this game being played nowadays? This unfair concurrence, I'm saying as my own perspective. But how can we tackle this with young people when there's so many competent professionals in marketing, crafting perfect messages for them to attract them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're. As you think about AI, it's not obvious to me that we're worried about it in the right way. I think everyone's worried about using AI for kids to cheat in school or something. But I think that's mostly misplaced, because the way to prevent cheating is to have the kinds of assignments that you can't have AI do.
Yeah, of course.
Like that's an obvious thing. And I can't tell you how many meetings I've been at and how many committees I'm on. Like, how are we going to stop cheating? I'm like, why are you giving multiple choice tests? Is my first question.
Change the testing.
Like, why do you have a short answer essay that could be done by ChatGPT? Because if it can, then that's a dumb test, you know? I think the bigger issue is that marketers are able to dynamically create messages that are tailored for capturing attention of young people. And then they can rapidly test many different combinations of those messages. And they're going to basically be much faster and much more comprehensive than your high school science teacher. You know, your high school science teacher is like, I don't know, I'm just in charge and you're supposed to do what I say. Like, that's as far as they think about it. A marketer's like, how can I say this so that you keep scrolling, you know? And so, yeah, I absolutely think that's a huge issue. And I think there's no will for regulation. And I think that the people who are sounding the alarm are sounding the alarm about the wrong stuff. And because they're sounding the alarm about the wrong stuff, then the marketers are perfectly happy to be like, you're right, social media causes depression. It's like, which doesn't. But like that's what they want to, they love when everyone talks about that, because then no one pays attention to the real problem. So, so that's a kind of pessimistic view, but that's my honest assessment. But I think that, you know, the alternative is that there's just no replacement for human connection, in the sense that, like, if you want to get a young person to do something hard or even seemingly impossible, they will do that when they have a relationship with an adult whose opinions they care about. Now, they don't care about every adult's opinions, right? But if that's an adult who they really care what they think, or usually sometimes it's an older peer, you know, they'll do anything. And I didn't write about this in my book, but, you know, I spent a long time just studying summer camps. And I touched on this in chapter 12 of my book. But one summer camp owner, this guy cracks me up. He was like just looking for an activity for his middle school and high school boys to just keep them occupied. And so he had a bunch of telephone poles in a field. And he was like, whoever can lift up and flip over a telephone pole will be like honored for like all eternity. Now, that's like a dangerous thing, because the kid could drop the telephone pole in their head, right? And it's almost impossible. And yet every morning, it was a bunch of teenage boys in a field trying, just at 7 a.m. before breakfast, trying to lift up telephone poles to flip them over. It was totally pointless, except that it was awesome, you know? And it's almost like a nice psychology experiment, that it's a contentless activity that only has the purpose of enhancing your reputation. And I just think that in the current age that we underestimate how valuable that human relationship and connection is. And so we underinvest in it. And then we're shocked that kids are like bad at school and don't do anything. And they're like, oh, well, our solution to kids being behind in school is to have an AI robot diagnose their deficiencies and then assign them homework that fixes their deficiencies. And I was like, who told you that kids want to go to a computer that tells them all of their flaws, first of all, and then after that gives them the hardest possible thing that makes their brain hurt that they're going to fail at? Like, who told you that that's what kids who are failing want? Like, I don't think that's what they want. I think they're willing to do that if it's in relationship with an adult whose opinion they care about.
Right.
Which then makes me think, in an AI age, what we should really be focusing on is not what the tech can do. The tech is pretty mundane, actually, in a lot of education. It should be the human relationships that now are the front and center in a world in which all knowledge is at your fingertips.
2 episodes ago, we interviewed Paul Menier. His book, he launched a book. It's called "Relations Are Everything," and he points to that youth work should be focusing also on that relationships and the relationship that young people create with the teacher, the youth worker, the mentor. It's more important than the rest, because if that relationship is in place, kids are willing to accept even flipping phone poles, telephone poles, because it isn't idiotic. It is something that it's worth striving true. Because like you said, at 7 a.m., they were trying to do something that doesn't make a lot of sense. But
it's something that not everyone can do.
Yeah.
And so it's this classic anthropological concept of earned prestige that, like power, you can inherit, like your parents can give you money or an army or something, and you can have power. Prestige is only earned through your deeds. And critically, those deeds have to be public. People have to see what you've done. And super motivating to earn prestige because no one can take away that thing you did at a moment when not everyone could do it. And again, I think there's so much focus on the tasks that we have people do. And I think what's more important is the quality of the task as it relates to, is it rare? Is it prestigious? Is it like an honor? That quality is more important than like, I don't know, does the word problem you're doing in math have your birthday in it and therefore you're more interested in it? Like, I think that kind of stuff's dumb. But like you tell a 14-year-old no one's ever solved this word problem before, subset of kids would be like, I'll do that. Like there's a famous story that I read last year, and I wish I remember more of the details, but it was like a low-income school in New Orleans. And it was kids where, people weren't giving a lot of these kids a chance to be successful mathematicians. And then the teacher was like, prove the Pythagorean theorem. No, it was prove the quadratic equation only using geometry, not using algebra. And they're like, okay, I can do that. It's high school geometry. And it turns out no one had ever done that before. And then they published their proof. And it was amazing, And I think that kind of thing is underutilized, not just in formal schooling, but in a lot of contexts. And it's important because if status and respect matter, but if there's only one pyramid of prestige, there's only one person can be at the top, then it creates all kinds of status competition. But if there's multiple pyramids, if there's multiple ways to be awesome, then now everyone has a shot at status and respect, and then everyone can believe in the system if it's a good system.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you. Is it all about challenging young people? It's presenting them challenges, or are there other ways to work around their psychology and these needs that they have, and I would argue we have as well, for respect and status?
Well, I think that a challenge is a necessary but not sufficient condition. I think it's like if I ask a 8th grader to do something that every 1st grader can do, like that's not impressive, right? If I ask them to do something that only a few 10th graders can do, then it could go one of two ways. One way is they say, this is unfair. Why are you asking me to do something that's impossible? People my age typically can't do. And so this is, I'm going to be unfairly and unjustly punished for being asked to do something that I can't. And you see that sometimes where a teacher will be like, all right, guys, we're going to do college level thinking. And then the kids are like, you can't give me a C for this. I'm not in college. I'm in high school, So I think the other way it could go, though, is that you have the high standard, but you have sufficient support and that you make it possible for everyone to meet this advanced standard. Well, now all of a sudden, the route to status and respect feels open. It's no longer being used as an exclusionary criteria to say some of you aren't good enough. The high standards are used as an inclusion criteria to say everyone is included in this higher standard of performance. And if you need different accommodations to meet that standard, okay, fine. Let's just figure it out. But everyone's going to be held to it. And then it feels respectful. It feels like you're being taken seriously.
So that's what you talk on your book about, the mentor mindset, no? This idea of having high standards and high respect and offering support. So how does this look like in terms of the behavior of the adult? What is support in these cases, or what constitutes support?
I mean, there's a lot of ways to think of it. The way psychologists think of it is that support is like the sum total of resources that the person perceives to have at their fingertips. And given that, then support could be time. It could be emotional support, someone saying they believe in you. But it could also be like the ability to go ask somebody for tips. It could be a skill that you have or that you've been taught, right? Whether it's time management or strategy or whatever. And so the part of the trick is, as an adult, if I'm going to be a mentor, to both have the high standard, but also assess what kinds of supports are lacking and then provide those just in time. And that's why great leaders who are really motivating are attuned to what people are feeling. The wrong way to think of it is, I ask you to do something hard. I see how stressed out you are. And then I'm like, oh, I regret asking you to do that. I'm going to take away the demand. It's more like, I ask you to do something. I notice that you're distressed. And then I try to troubleshoot and say, okay, what do you need so that you can still do this hard thing without feeling overwhelming distress?
So one question that is hurting here in my mind is, we in this series, we're talking about Generation Alpha and Generation Z. And my question is, what challenges are generational specific and what are developmental stage specific? Because are teenage so different if they're Generation Alpha or Generation Z?
I mean, the argument I make in my book, 10 to 25, is that there are timeless things that are true about adolescence. And those timeless things come in part from just the evolution of the human species. And, this desire for status and respect didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, it came about because it helped humans survive. And so how could that be the case? Well, if I'm an infant or a 3-year-old, no one evaluates a 3-year-old's deservingness of staying alive based on whether they killed animals or foraged. Like you take care of a 3-year-old because parents take care of 3-year-olds and they just deserve it for being a child. But at some point, the tribe has to decide whether to keep you around, in part based on your contributions. So if you're 16 years old and sitting there like a lump on a log, at some point the tribe is going to be like, we're not bringing you protein anymore. We're not protecting you during the night, from animals and warriors and stuff like that. You're on your own. And in the savannah, in our evolutionary history, 200,000 years ago, if you're alone, you die, basically. So the desire to demonstrate publicly that you have competence and value is the same as the desire to stay alive. Okay. So this desire for status and respect is not like a frivolous desire. It's like the differentiator of whether you die as a human once you reach adolescence. Okay. Now, when you think of it that way, it's like, well, has that changed in the 12-year period between Gen A and Gen Z? Like, of course not. Right. So why would you then see different behaviors between the generations? Well, culture changes all the time, even though our human nature doesn't change. And then culture changes a lot of things. Like it changes what demands we have to face and what resources we have available to meet those demands, right? Just think about all the demands on our attention now versus the 80s, right? I mean, every person who works in the modern economy is managing a small screen, a medium screen, and a large screen, and maybe multiple at all times, right? And again, we're always like, kids get off screens. It's like, well, show me someone who makes a lot of money who isn't managing all 3 of those screens at all times. Yeah. And like magically they're supposed to figure that out at 18? Like, no. And yet young people have that as a demand, but we don't provide any resources for them. Instead, we just let every company just run amok, kind of competing for their attention. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, all of our investment accounts that pay for our retirement own stock in all of those companies where their main product is teenagers' attention. And then we turn around and blame those teenagers. When it's like, yeah, well, that's why I can retire or buy a house, right? At any rate, that whole ironic system is a cultural adaptation that young people have to adapt to. And that affects what counts for status and respect. Mm-hmm. So anytime there's like a loss of trust in the government, right? Well, that'll decrease investment in long-term outcomes that require trust in the government, right? Or trust in the labor market. If you believe that the labor market won't reward you for having delayed gratification and having done your homework, etc. If you believe that instead you'll be exploited by the labor market or just discarded, then maybe you don't think it's high status to be good at school, right? So the high level punchline is that when culture changes, then the criteria for status and respect change because the demands and resources change that we have to respond to. And so the trick is to like keep in mind the same underlying theoretical principle that guides human nature while also seeing how culture shifts it. What I don't agree with is this kind of like, it's almost like a cultural birthmark hypothesis that like children who are raised at a certain time are imprinted with a certain deficit in their brains for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of these authors are trying to say about generations. And I think that's mostly nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, we also already had conversations with other guests to talk about that new generations don't have a smaller attention span. They just have a lot of more distractions to deal with, obviously.
I mean, the person with the worst attention span in my family is my baby boomer mom. Like she can't get off Facebook. Like it's like your grandkids are right in front of you and all you talk about is your grandkids. And yet you're on Facebook talking about your grandkids in front of your grandkids that you're not talking to. So, but then if you send her an all caps news story about how bad the attention span is of Gen A, she would read that in a minute and send it to all of her friends on Facebook, you know?
Exactly.
And so there's this kind of ironic loop that everyone thinks basically that the next generation is worse, when in fact, like there are societal trends overall, right, that affect all the generations. And it's self-serving to conclude that the next generation is worse off than you.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon, right? As we age, we start seeing this. There's this age gap, and we stop understanding a lot of the issues of the younger generations.
I mean, you can even look at like violent or impulsive crime. I mean, so like murders, car crashes, theft, all this kind of stuff. It's not so much generational, although all that stuff has declined in the last 25 years, as much as it's just chronological age related. And so, there's a crime curve that crime increases dramatically starting at 15, and then it decreases back to normal at 25. And so 40-year-olds just can't fathom certain crimes. It doesn't make any sense to them in a way that for a 19-year-old, it does make sense. But then those 40-year-olds are always looking down and thinking, oh, it's a generational problem. The next generation is broken, when it's really just an age problem that almost everybody ages out of a certain thinking.
I was going to ask you about what you were saying, that there is an age issue that is existing across generations, and then there is the cultural expression of that in a certain age, depending on technology or what is perceived as statutory or relevant for a young person. Throughout these kind of constant changes, and as society changes faster and faster, a lot of educators worry about how to help the younger generations become resilient, become capable of dealing with all this change and all with these rapid cultural shifts that are happening all the time. So in your perspective, how do we build resilience in young people? How can we help them, I'm not going to say survive all this crisis, but actually have a structure that allows them to deal with this level of uncertainty?
I mean, in general, well, first of all, it's very hard, and this is it. It's harder for young people than we give them credit for. And then when they don't make the choice that we think we would have made, we think them irrational, right? But we don't always know what we would have done if we were responding to the incentives that they're facing. Like, just to give you a very concrete example, like in the 90s when I grew up, you could do goofy stuff, and the only people who would know about it were the people who were there. and saw it. And everybody else might spread the rumor, but they weren't there. They don't really know, you know? And so you could always just pretend like it never happened, right? And be like, what are you talking about?
Move on.
It was nothing like that. That's a lie, you know? But now just everything is recorded, right? And it never goes away. And what does that do to young people? You know, what is the advice to a kid who's bullied? Well, in the old days, you're like, move on. No one's going to remember it. Like, you're overestimating how important it is. And now it's like, every time someone wants to get back at you, they can send that clip around, right? Or a screenshot or whatever it is. So like, that's like a hard thing to deal with. And so how do you parent or coach or mentor when the incentives that we're responding to are different than the incentives that they're responding to? And it's hard for us to fathom what we would do in their situation, you know? And I'll give you another example. So we have a project with this school called Alpha School in the US, where one of the high schoolers created an app that gives dating advice to teenagers. And she interviewed a bunch of clinical psychologists and got books and advice, and she trained the model based on scientific evidence. This is a large language model, an AI app, and trained it based on scientific evidence of how to deal with relationships.
Right.
And so we did an experiment where we compared this AI model trained on the science of relationships to just moms giving dating advice. And so and we had real teenagers use the app first to figure out what kinds of questions they would ask. And teenagers are like, I'm talking to this person on Snapchat. We've been talking for 2 weeks. I sent them a message. I thought it was great. I don't hear back. What does it mean? And the app is like, okay, sounds like you're really upset. Yeah, you know, here's what it typically means on Snapchat. And then they'll walk you through the progression of relationships. And sometimes they're fully online, sometimes they're not. Anyway, and the moms were like, what are you talking about? Like, talk to me when you see them in person. Like, I don't care that no one replied to your Snapchat. Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And so, unsurprisingly, teenagers hated the mom's advice, right? But, you know, if you're mid 40s, like, you literally were dating before cell phones, right? Let alone before apps and all these other things. And so, we're just not credible sources of advice for a lot of things. And when we fail to realize that, then we give poor advice and young people feel misheard or unheard. And so it's really important to kind of be in a different perspective.
Yeah. The other day I was that kind of mom because my youngest daughter, she was saying that she needed to send a message, but she needed to send it through Instagram, not WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is not cool. And I said, but it's just a message. You can no, but it has a different kind of rules associated with. So even changing from WhatsApp to Instagram makes a difference.
Right.
Yeah, I was told recently, since we're sharing, I was told recently that I put a final dot punctuation on my sentences in WhatsApp, and it makes me sound angry. It's like, no, in WhatsApp you do not use final punctuation. It sounds angry. I'm like, what?
Periods.
Yeah, no, with the period.
My approach is to not even pretend like I'm trying to get the format right and to put in signals that I'm not even trying. And so like when my teenage daughter texts me, I'll dictate the words high five emoji, but sometimes it'll put in emoji and I delete the emoji and I have the words high five emoji just so it's crystal clear.
It's clear
that I'm not doing the emoji thing.
If you can't beat them, confuse them.
or I'll say like screenshot of your text message, you know? And then I'll quote in quotes and then retype the text message. But like, but I think that's the general point that, you know, when you think about relationships with young people, the stereotype is that they have to be the cool person, right? And then they have to be with it. And I don't think that's true. I think you just have to be authentic.
Yeah.
And honest about what you don't know. And what I don't know is the trends that are going to change so fast, right? Memes are so fast now. Because a lot of them are generated by AI. And then the algorithms are promoting them. And then there's the new one. So like, I don't even try, but I do try to be authentic. I just don't try to be on top of it.
Yeah.
We're getting almost at the end of our time here. We do have a question from a previous guest, and I'll ask Rui to read it to you.
And the question is, what is something you did or learned that really surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the initial studies we did on the importance of framing critical feedback were really surprising. That, in these experiments, we would critique a middle schooler's essays, like a seventh grader, and be like, all right, this is the better or worse way to write this essay. And half of kids like wouldn't even turn in a revised essay, even though they could clearly get a better grade. But if you accompany that criticism with a clarifying like Post-it note that said, I'm giving you these comments because I have high standards and I know that you can meet them, then that clarifying comment had a big effect. It doubled the rate at which students revised their essays.
Wow.
And that was shocking to me the first time I saw it. And we followed up on it and done other studies. But I think that the idea that a teacher, a parent, a coach could have everything in place, like a knowledgeable mentor, like timely feedback that's, directly related to performance, the chance to revise. You could do all those things and still half the time there's no improvement just because you framed it wrong. I think that was like really surprising for me. And it really suggests that lots of good intentions go unfulfilled and fail to yield positive outcomes because of a failure of perspective taking on our part. But that is something we can overcome with the right communication at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now you can leave a question for our next guest.
It's a great question. I mean, the joke question I'm thinking of is, where do your ideas come from? Do you know this trend that if you ask like a stand-up comedian that, it's an inside joke because no one can answer that. And but every podcast asks them where their ideas come from. I don't know. I what I always ask people is, what's a puzzle or problem you're working on or thinking about right now? And I often tend to think that you learn more from people by what they're currently puzzling on rather than what they've already figured out. Because then you get a sense of what their priorities are and what feels hard to them. Mm-hmm. And it leads in an interesting direction because you're talking about something that they don't already know the answer to. So then they're not just telling you what they've already worked out.
Yeah. Sounds like a great question.
Yeah, it's more exploratory. Yeah.
Yeah. What's a puzzle or problem that you're working on right now?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Dr. David Yeager, it was so nice to have you with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights with our listeners. We hope to read more from you and from your explorations in these topics. And let us know if we can support you as well in any way or form.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This podcast was brought to you by Tim Myers, recorded and edited by Rui Branco for the international project Inception of Learning, financed by the Erasmus Plus program. Our great partners for this project are the associations Fundacja Instytut Innowacji from Poland, Jasna Idnina from North Macedonia, and Odd Socks from Montenegro.